Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Gendered Economics. Today, we are shooting a new episode for a new podcast called Studying Economics with Her. My name is İrem.
And my name is Güneş, and we are the hosts of this podcast.
Güneş and I actually met in high school, and we both studied economics in our own way. So I'm going to ask Güneş first to introduce herself to you.
Thank you, İrem. To tell you a little bit more about myself, I studied economics in Turkey. I also did my master's. Now I'm doing my PhD at Brown in the United States. I'm still on my learning journey, but I'm also creating some knowledge along the way as well. This podcast is very important to me, and thank you for initiating this.
Thank you for joining. And I love how casual you are when you say, oh yeah, I studied PhD at Brown. Like, how does that feel? What are you doing at Brown? What does the PhD look like?
PhDs differ along like the programs, countries, even different universities offer different programs that can vary a lot. The kind of PhD that I do is focusing on taking some courses at first, then choosing your fields and taking some electives in that field. And then you also start writing some papers, doing more research. So the later half of this PhD journey is more focused on research, but the first half is still more involved with learning things. But you also studied economics, and I think your journey was a little different. Maybe you can tell us how you chose to study economics and how you decided to do masters.
Yeah, I actually didn't know I was going to study economics. I did a liberal arts and science college, so we only declared our major after a year of having seen different courses. I thought economics was super interesting, but it wasn't the only thing I was interested in. Liberal arts and science colleges are great to build you a good foundation of like general understanding of everything. Like you take courses from different disciplines. Interdisciplinary thinking is very much on the focus, but it didn't really get me that much depth into economics as much as I would have liked to. Like we of course took introduction, international economics, macro and micro, and all the all the basics, but we didn't get to discuss that much in depth the solutions that I wanted to discuss yet. So then I chose to follow a master's that focused a bit more on public economics, but also public administration. And it was very quantitative. I think when I was doing it in my bachelor's, it was also a lot of theory, but not a lot of coding and understanding the effects of programs. But this time we were focusing on designing programs that fought poverty rather than just discussing what poverty is. And I realized, okay, yeah, this is something interesting I quite like doing. And here we are.
Not being fully sure if economics was the right field and then falling in love with it along the way is a very lucky thing to happen. A similar thing also happened to me. I wasn't sure that I would study economics in my high school as well, and I thought I would be an engineer all the time just because I really enjoyed math. And I remember some of my teachers were also telling me, oh, maybe like economics could also be interesting. But then I thought, well, I don't even know like how federal banks or like central banks set their policies. Then I thought, well, if you're going to study economics, you have to know these things in depth. So I also want to ask how gendered economics started for you and what are your plans going forward?
Right after master's, I started teaching in the same master's program. So I then stayed with the university quite a bit because I was really keen on quantitative methods, and I quite liked teaching, being engaged with young people, and I was having fun. But I think at one point I realized that I needed to do something more. Like I kept thinking to myself, in like 20 years, is this something I still want to be doing, or like where am I heading right now, right? Because I've always had this passion for gender equality since I was a little kid. I think, was a feminist at heart of, all people should have equal rights type of person. And I just felt like I've learned a lot of skills through my master's of how to use research into creating something that's good. But now I'm in academia and I'm still teaching other people how to do that, but I'm not doing it for myself. So I think then after that, I started thinking, okay, how can I merge academia with the things I like gender a little bit more? And I started designing a summer course for Maastricht Summer School. It was called Gendered Economics, ironically. It really looked at just how economics and gender equality intersects. And I realized as I was designing that course that this is something that could also perhaps work to change the narrative for gender equality, because so far it has always been about human rights narratives of like, oh yeah, gender should not matter, everyone should have equal rights. But clearly, not a lot of people care enough about just the human rights approach. And the people that do care, we already have them as allies in this. So I thought, okay, why not use the knowledge I have of economics to convince the parts of the population that we're not yet able to convince that gender equality is a problem for all? And why not design interventions that economically empower females? That's where we are at the moment, what I'm trying to achieve at least.
That's really nice because sometimes I also encounter like some papers that analyze the effect of some policies that are targeted at reducing the gender inequality. And sometimes they end up not working and sometimes they end up having the opposite effects. Even if you have the intention of trying to reduce inequalities, trying to bring societies into more optimal states, you can still not be very successful in doing so. And I think that was like very interesting because yes, like there are many policymakers, but still somehow not all policies are effective. And yes, lack of information, lack of awareness is also an issue because some of the policies they're in effect, but not many people are aware of it. So it doesn't have the desired effect on the general society. It just has a like very local, very minimal effect. But if more people were able to benefit from it, then the spread of this would be larger. I think having a more deep knowledge on this topic would also help with the real life policy implementations.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the point, right? Because when we talk about change or when we talk about gender equality in general, I think people often make the mistake of saying, oh, this is not something that I should do as an individual. This is something that the government or like the UN should take the lead on. And that's what we've been seeing. It's always interventions led by big institutions. But I was like, oh, what if we can design things that work as individuals, as companies, as groups? I think it comes back to when we were talking about economics. Like in the beginning, I didn't know I wanted to study economics and I was a bit afraid of it because to me, economics, the way it was thought, it was always like, oh, it's the same thing as finance. It's just money. And I was thinking when I went to the first economics course, I was like, wow, we didn't really talk about money that much. We talked about resources, we talked about allocation. Now, of course, money is a resource. We also do talk about it, but it's not the only thing. We talked about behavioral change. We talked about how people act. And then I thought, okay, then there's more to than just the money. And that's the type of change that I'm also trying to bring here. I'm trying to do more than just economics. I'm trying to show a different narrative. I'm trying to make them train in different fields so that we can bring gender equality in different ways, not just monetarily.
And I think also with this podcast, we have this aim of breaking some of the biases, some of the prejudices against economics and studying economics, because it's perceived as, okay, oh, this is just calculating some things, it's just finance sheets. And some people think about it as, oh, this is just a very social science, there is no calculation, nothing based on maths, but somehow both are very wrong. Everything is based on lots of maths, but we also observe how societies work, how they change, and how can they be even improved. And when policies need to be designed, we try to find ways to make them effective and make sure that they reach the results that we aim them to reach. And hopefully by informing more people to study economics and hopefully getting more women in this field, because it's also a men-dominated field, we hope to also influence more people to be interested, more people to be engaged with economics and overall policies related in this field. Honestly, it feels like everything can be related to economics and economics can be related to everything.
Because economic decisions affect everyday citizens. It affects all of our lives, like how people, governments, communities decide to share their resources and what will be a priority. So I think if you have studied economics as a female, there's also a higher chance you will be in a position where you can then decide on the allocation of resources later on in life, right? Because you will have the theoretical background. And I think that's what I'm also secretly hoping happens. Because right now, we're not only missing in the economics field, but we're also missing from the decision making parts because we are assumed to, well, not have as good opinions or not as good of a background in understanding what is good for society. And then if half of the population is left out of decision making, then of course decisions are made in a way that doesn't benefit us. Let's think about period tax in that sense. I'm sure if there would have been more women in the decision making capacity, some of them would have said, why do I have to pay extra money on top of, already going through a period pain? And I now have to pay for something that is a natural occurrence. But if you don't experience it, then you don't think about these things. And to you, it's not a problem, whereas half of the population is facing this problem, right? So a bigger picture for me is really to inspire females to not shy about economics related topics just because it seems a big, vague term and you are maybe afraid of talking about money and finances in general, to make them gain confidence to show that economics is a broad scope and you can, like, you don't have to be a mathematician to be an economist. You do have to understand some math at one point in your life, unfortunately. But you can also be interested in psychology and still be interested in behavioral economics.
Well, I agree. And I also realized when you said if you study economics, you might end up influencing the policies. I don't know if you formed this sentence consciously or if there was like a subconscious element in it, because I think the overall sense in studying economics is that when you graduate, you will work at a bank. When you graduate, you will do accounting. When you graduate, you will be like a financial advisor, but you don't have to. You can also, and you should advise for the policies that are being designed, that are being improved. And I feel like often economists are not involved in this process as much as they should be. But usually when it comes to economists, there's also a perspective that's like, oh, if I ask this question to one economist, I will get one answer. If I ask it to another person, I will get a completely different answer. And this makes many policy makers or like politicians have like a doubtful approach towards economists, but that's actually the thing with economists. Like there are so many different approaches you can take, and there are also so many different considerations that you should make. So there's no one right answer, and I feel like that's why sometimes our opinion is not asked, but it should be, because we're the ones studying how societies are doing, how we have developed so far, how we can improve and reduce inequalities. You studied at Utrecht in the Netherlands. Why Netherlands? Why not anywhere else?
I think Netherlands was a decision I made based on just democracy of law. I was thinking I want to be in a country where I can be 100% sure that the law will always protect any of its citizens. And I think just having gender as an interest, Netherlands always stood out as, oh, maybe it's a bit more of a gender equal country where gender doesn't set you back as much. So I thought if I could study in the Netherlands, I could maybe live a life where I'm not bound by who I am. Because I'm a female, I'm not taken less seriously. I don't know if that's true now that I think about it. I think being a female, there's always this burden that comes with not being taken seriously. But I definitely think living in the Netherlands also really brought me some adulting. I think that's a word I can use. Like if I would have gone to the US, I would have had a great time just being a student. I think I would have enjoyed, student life a lot more. Whereas in the Netherlands, you are your own person. You are an adult and you have to pay rent. You have to, think about things like bills that maybe you didn't yet think about until you moved out. You have to think what you're gonna cook, and like when you're gonna cook, you have to think about getting a job after, maybe in between classes, because everybody there starts working from 14 onwards, even if it's at a supermarket or a restaurant. They're just working to make their like daily spendings essentially. And I think that was a culture shift that I had to get used to, that you're really an independent person. You just have to do a lot on your own. But it was quite nice because I could study economics, like liberal arts in college, in 3 years. So it was an appeal to get a degree in 3 years. You work hard, but you are also rewarded an extra year. I think it was really nice to have that freedom of adulting and to be in a country where, you didn't have to worry about small things like, am I going to be safe if I'm walking around at night? But of course, it's a conscious choice I made, right? It's also not easy living away from your parents and your family in a foreign country, I must say. So I did miss that. I don't know how it's for you because you studied the masters and bachelors in Turkey, and now you're doing a PhD in US, which is even more further away. How do you feel about it?
I knew that studying abroad was an option because in my high school there were also people applying abroad, but I was not part of an IB program. My high school just simply did not offer it. I also did not take SATs or anything, so I knew it was a slight option, but I thought my major chances would come from studying for the Central University entrance exam. And there were a couple universities that were my like dream universities, and that was the one I ended up going to actually, and I'm very proud and lucky to be able to call myself a graduate of MET. And so I studied for the university entrance exam, and that's also a very stressful process because almost everyone else in the country is studying for the same exam. There is only one exam in a year, not like SATs, not like those AP classes. So it was also a little bit stressful for me because if anything goes wrong, then you have to study another year for it. And yes, you're still young, but it's still a lot of time and a lot of uncertainties. And something that I was criticizing a lot was like, I'm 16, how am I supposed to know what I will end up liking? How am I supposed to know what career that I will take the most joy from? But I was still keeping an open door because I also liked this social aspect, discussions of different problems that we see in day-to-day life and trying to find solutions to them, trying to at least improve the situation, even if there is not an immediate solution at first. I wasn't sure if engineering alone would bring me that. I didn't think there was a field that could combine these two because these two felt so far away. Like one of them was like real life social issues that we face. The other one was like, okay, how do we build the most effective thing, or how do we program this? That's when I was unaware of what economics really was. That's when I thought it was just, oh, you just study like the central bank policies, or like you just study the exchange rates or whatever. But then I realized actually, well, you can combine these. You can study the people and how they make decisions and how to make optimal policies so that we can actually solve these issues that we are facing. So yes, I ended up studying at UNU-MERIT for my undergrad, and that was a 4-year program for me. And after that, I did my master's. I always knew I would want to do something in research, something in academia. So that was like a easy decision for me, especially once I started seeing what economics really was and what I could do there. So I just switched to a different university, to Bilkent, still in the same city, in the capital Ankara. After that, I realized, okay, I think now I have to get out of my comfort zone and do something somewhere else. So that's when I was applying for programs for my PhD abroad. I was considering Europe. I was also considering some programs in the US because I think both had their own advantages. Well, overall, I think for a PhD level, for the fields that I was interested in, there were more US programs than there were in Europe. And I ended up coming to Brown. I was also impressed by the university, by the faculty, because right now it's also a high-ranking university when you consider it, but also the people that you will work with, the research fields that the faculty is focusing on is also very important. So that's how I base my decision.
So it was really the environment that the US, like specifically Brown, could provide for you that made you choose Brown then, is that right?
Exactly. The opportunities that the programs offered made Brown stick out the most, and I'm very lucky to be here that I'm also part of this program. So yeah, my studying economics journey was a little bit longer than yours, and some of my friends were always like, how do you even stand this? Because they also studied in Europe when their bachelor was 3 years, and even that was hard for them. And they're like, your bachelor's was longer, you did your master's, now you're still doing something even longer. Like, when are you going to stop studying? And the answer seems to be never.
But that's good, right? You always want to be in this learning curve where you can just learn and learn and learn. Um,
Exactly.
I'm just curious because obviously my entire study life has been revolving around Europe for quite a bit. And in here, for example, how it happens is there's, let's say, a PhD funding available so that the university would open a call for a specific project with a specific supervisor, and then there would be applicants applying, and then they would get interviewed. But how does it go for the US? Is it the same system or is it somehow different?
Again, this can differ between countries, between programs, even in the same country. But most of the universities that I applied to, they had their own application procedure. For most of them, you would need to submit a statement of purpose, your transcript, your educational background. If you had any writing samples, well, I didn't have a paper published, but I was working on my master's thesis, so I could at least send that. But if you have papers, you can also send those to signal what kind of research you're doing or what kind of research that you're interested in to the universities. And they also ask you different types of questions. Some of them are also asking you to write essays on different topics. There were also some application questions that were like, oh, send us a video talking about this. The formats can vary a lot, but most of the time it's your educational background and your statement of purpose. So you write about what you want to get out of the program so that the universities can see if what you want, what your expectations are, and what they can offer are matching. You would also need some letters of recommendation from your advisors, from your previous professors, and that's how I ended up coming here. But yes, there were also some programs, especially in Europe, that were like, we want someone that is specifically focused on this topic, that will do research specifically on this topic, and we will be able to fund that. For me, it wasn't that, it was just economics. Yes, I'm still more interested in micro theory, but I can also do research in macro or more applied empirical work. I also get a stipend because I also work as a teaching assistant and a research assistant for the faculty members. That's also a very interesting experience because I think when you're an undergrad studying something, your professors, you always look up to them, but you don't really get to work with them because there's like a more of a student-teacher relationship. But as you proceed in your graduate education journey, you actually get to work with them. They treat you as their colleagues. You also work with them on some research, on some courses that they're teaching, or even on some of the projects that you have yourself. And that's also a very different experience, seeing the backstage of the things, because when you go listen to classes and then take the exams, that's a very different experience.
Yeah, I can definitely see the difference between you being a face on a pool of 200 plus people versus you being a face they collaborate with, they share ideas, they brainstorm different solutions. So I guess I'm just wondering though, why a PhD and like where is this gonna go as a career? Where do you want the PhD to end up in?
I want to do even more research. I want to do even more teaching. With academia, I think it also combines learning, creating, and having this one-on-one interaction with new generation of economists, new generation of policymakers and leaders.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, it's
yeah.
not like PhD, well, other than your time, of course, takes anything out of your life, right? It gives you a lot more skills. You can still apply anything that you learn to any job later on. You could work for a company, you could work for a government, you could work for a development organization or university.
Well, an economics concept here is the trade-off. Yes, so it takes my time, but it also takes the time from the experience that I would gain at working somewhere. So that's also a very big question I had in my senior year, especially because I wasn't very sure then if doing a master's and then a PhD would be the best thing because, well, if I worked somewhere else for maybe 5 years, would I end up being at a better place than I would end up after completing these programs? And I wasn't very sure at that point. And I don't think everyone should be very sure. Everyone should have their questioning moment somewhere in their journey, see which one is the best for them and decide to move forward. There are also lots of people who work at maybe Federal Bank or IMF, and then after working for a while, they come back to academia, do their masters, and then go back again, and then maybe they come back for their PhD or they do it simultaneously. I thought it was better for me to be able to get into these programs while my knowledge was still fresh, while studying was still something fun.
And I think it's kind of like economics, right? The beauty of the field that we studied is that there doesn't have to be only one straight answer. There can be multiple ways to get somewhere, but you always have to think about what does the other path give you? Is it better? Is it a better use of your time or your resources, considering what you know? And that's kind of what we're trying to achieve with this podcast, right? We will be hosting different variety of individuals who are studying in different universities, but all within the field of economics.
They will also be at different paths of their journey. Some of them are just starting studying, some of them have already graduated from their programs and are working in their fields.
We hope that also shows there are different paths to what economics is, and hopefully that empowers another person like us to follow economics, right? Wouldn't it be lovely if we had more females in this field? I think that would be lovely.
Yeah, it would be lovely, but it would also be beneficial for the entire society.
That's
Just
right.
like we discussed, the policies that are being designed, the policies that are being implemented, even the ones that already exist, can reach their full potential if there are more people, if there are more females in this field.
Basically, if you want to learn more about different programs that exist in the field of economics all around the world, or if you have specific questions about studying economics, let us know. Follow us, see who we interview next time.
And hope to see you soon in future episodes.